Hi, folks. Now, let's be honest. The Democrat Party right now feels like a bad satire written by an overpaid DEI hire. See, our governor in California, who gives new meaning to the word awful, Gavin Newsom, is currently traveling across the East Coast, doing his best resistance cosplay. Meanwhile, our state is literally in the throes of Bolshevik destabilization with anarcho-communist agitators attacking ICE agents and using their children as shields. By the way, in case you haven't noticed, this isn't just clown world, it's Cirque du Soleil. And Gavin, the hair gel Lenin, is too busy soaking up beers at 7 a.m. like only California's slick-talking messiah of mayhem could do, while feeding a pungent word salad to the Tennessee holler where he claims masked ICE agents are basically martial law, and Stephen Miller apparently moonlights as a Bond villain. So buckle up, folks, because we're diving headfirst into the smug, delusional political theater of progressive victimhood where facts are fascism and enforcing law apparently is oppression. Let's roll the tape.
I don't know what it last couple of years. Like, see you guys everywhere. Like, no bullshit.
We tend to lift up whoever gives this guy shit. And you guys have done a very good job of giving this.
Well, lately, yeah, God bless. After LA and raids and then nationalizing or federalizing the Guard. But it was what they did during the fires. Just a full-on assault on reason, truth, trust. We were on our back legs and we had to pivot. I remember like 2 days in going, we have to do something radical.
It was noticeable. If the shoe was on the other foot, a Democratic president conditioning aid to Republican states, the view from afar, even from like outside the country of what's happening in LA, it looks like martial law.
In many respects it is. It just depends which lens you see the world. I mean, people talk about we crossed that threshold, that red line on authoritarianism. For you and me, no. For the Latino community in LA, full on. People quite literally aren't going to the graduations. Right. They're not getting groceries. They're having other people drive them, so not racially profiled in their cars. And it's happening at a ferocity and scale that's shock and awe. And it just gets lost sometimes because there's a new tariff policy or there's just another true social. And so critical. We just keep our eye on the ball. And these are masked people, unmarked cars with no identification, grabbing people from their cars, in some cases smashing the windows, grabbing them and they're screaming, ripping them away from their kids or their kids.
How is this legal?
Throwing it.
That's what I don't understand. Mayor Bass just filed a lawsuit. Yeah. You have a lawsuit against him.
Make us breathe
but like, how effective is that?
We're going to test the boundaries of that. The good news is we've had more success than failure, particularly the lower courts. It's then when we get in the appellate, things get delayed and they get slowed down, and everything that's coming at him, we're smash mouth right back.
Did Gavin smash mouth right back too when he pretended to take a fake phone call to dodge a grieving woman whose house had just burned down in the Palisades fire? By the way, that's not leadership. That's a man so addicted to optics he thinks accountability is beneath him. And now here he is doing his beer-sipping press tour, warning us that masked ICE agents are the face of authoritarianism while anarchists roam the streets of LA basically with impunity. This interview isn't just theatrical, it's a masterclass in projection. Newsom paints federal law enforcement as jackbooted thugs while conveniently ignoring the decades of state-sanctioned lawlessness his party has fostered in California. And when I say decades, I mean pretty close to half a century. From sanctuary city policies, which are illegal, by the way, that shield violent offenders, to a collapsing justice system that punishes order and rewards chaos. The irony here is beautiful. Gavin is calling the enforcement of immigration law shock and awe, yet California has spent years conducting its own soft war on citizenship, sovereignty, and public safety. So what we're watching isn't just partisan spin. It's the logical endpoint of an ideology that no longer recognizes the rule of law unless it serves this Democrat narrative. And in that worldview, criminals become victims, enforcers become villains, and actual citizens, well, they're just collateral damage. And by the way, folks, I want you to keep in mind as we're watching this interview that this man is out in the East Coast launching his bid to run the federal government, the very government whose laws he's currently questioning the validity of. Make it make sense.
On social media, if you want to come out, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, talk about crime in California. We'll talk about your murder rate being 2x. Got a war room mentality, but we also are fortified with tens of millions of dollars. The legislature is ready to finance and fund. And the largest state in the union, the largest economy, fourth largest in the world, we're going to have the backs of our diverse communities.
I mean, we're one of the most dependent states in the country.
Yeah.
They go around here bragging about how fiscally responsible we are, but they never mention that we get 40% of our state
California
budget
takes
from the federal
30.
government. There was a little bit of talk on your
30%
feeds
California.
of at what point does California stop paying for its own oppression?
I kind of threatened that a few weeks ago.
It's not.
And got the ire of the right, which is ironic. Let me give you a numeric. Texas took in 2023 71.1, so taker state by 71. Yeah. That same year, California donor state with $83 billion. And these guys,
yeah, but it takes $120 billion a year, dude.
About how economically sound they are, fiscally concerned.
You should hear them. It's
complete
crazy.
BS. And by
every day.
71% of this country's GDP, communities like this, blue
cities, that's right,
metros, infant mortality, maternal mortality, issues around life expectancies, death of despair, gun death rates, on every critical issue, insured versus uninsured, wages. It's the red states that significantly underperform the blue states. We have got to flood the zone with these facts and not allow their alternative facts to persist as they do on Fox and One American News and Newsmax. They're winning the narrative war. They have 9 out of the top 10 cable shows. They're all right-wing Fox shows. The podcasts were getting crushed as well. Flood the zone, and we got to meet people where they are.
So just to drill down on that, though, is there a point where that talk would turn into some real legislative stuff?
So here's the challenge. The vast majority of those contributions from blue states to federal government come from individual taxpayers. So they would have to withhold those dollars. A relatively small amount are processed through the state. So we're looking at those accounts that are processed through the state and looking at legal vulnerabilities, because we want to be sober in a Trump regime that's ready, fire, aim, trying to take down every grant that we have and try to take down every appropriation that's been congressionally approved. So we're being thoughtful about it, but full-on commitment to determining if there's a pathway to do that. He danges these threats on every critical issue. He's doing on sanctuary policy, I'm going to pull back your money. He's doing on LGBTQ issues, pull back your money. He's doing on DEI issues related to the Jewish community and issues related to Gaza in the Middle East and institutions of higher learning, pulling those dollars. The courts
Wait a minute, why did he just soften the rhetoric on that?
So if he's going to do that, why the hell not? Blue states look at that transfer of payment, trying to play, unfortunately, the perverse game that he's playing.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there's no way this man is a serious contender for president. Now with those cringe hand movements and the energy of a malfunctioning TED Talk robot. Newsom talks like a man trying to sell a beachfront timeshare property on Mars. Fast, flashy, and completely detached from reality. But beyond the optics, the substance is even worse. His outrage over Trump withholding federal funds is either pure ignorance or pure theater. I would go as far to say a little bit of both, because nearly every modern president has used the conditional release of federal money as leverage. Obama did it with education funding tied to Common Core. Biden's DOJ threatened funding over gun laws. Even Bill Clinton withheld highway funds to enforce national drinking age laws. This isn't authoritarianism. It's just policy. What we're seeing here is Newsom trying to reframe basic federalism as oppression, because the left has spent years conditioning their base to interpret any loss of control as victimization. He wraps California's financial mismanagement in identity politics and makes being a donor state sound like an act of martyrdom, when in reality, California's own tax and spend regime has made it unlivable for the middle class. In fact, California is the state that most rapidly eliminates its own middle class. This isn't about protecting diverse communities. It's about protecting the machinery of a one-party blue state ideological power. From DEI bureaucracies to illegal sanctuary city policies, all under the guise of fighting fascism. And the panic in his voice, well, that's not the fear of tyranny. It's the fear of losing control of the narrative.
We have seen some movement, I think, especially even on this immigration issue. People like Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz have started to rethink what happened here. What's your attitude to people like that who obviously played a role in helping this guy get into power, suddenly having a change of heart?
Someone does the right thing eventually. I remember I was talking about gay marriage here a moment ago in 2004. I felt like I was on my own island. It took like a decade for a lot of Democrats to be there. Instead of criticizing where were you for the last decade, I applauded the fact that they're there. Good for Joe Rogan for stating the obvious, that you're ripping someone, from their mother. We have someone who's a rising senior, who's a soccer star, taken with her mom and deported. She's beloved about her school and her community. She was just sent to Guatemala to
Shouldn't
call
have been
out
here
going after
illegally.
day laborers that are doing construction, to call out the folks that are out there in the farms that have nothing to do with their alleged criminal efforts. Now, on that, most of us are aligned. I certainly am. I cooperate. And I got receipts for that, over 11,000 people since I've been governor. I don't think a governor can lay claim to that. But they're not doing that when they're destroying the fabric of our communities, destroying the economy. Think about California that's got to rebuild over 18,000 structures in the most devastating wildfire in American history, at least modern American.
Who's gonna
in terms
do
of
it?
new
Right.
Yeah, 41% of California's workforce.
Right.
Texas and California, the highest percentage of immigrants and undocumented immigrants in their workforce and construction. Well, over 50% in California of people working in the farms and fields. And even Trump acknowledged that after he raided the farms in Ventura County. 2 days later, because the folks who wrote him a big check said, you got to stop. He said, well, we can't touch him. Meanwhile, he's back out there.
Right, because Stephen Miller always wins that fight.
Stephen Miller always wins the fight. And now Stephen Miller has one of the largest private armies in the world. This is serious.
I agree.
Tens of billions of dollars you just got.
Yep.
No accountability. Don't have to show ID. Don't have to show your faces. Don't even have to have a marked car. No due process. People can just simply disappear.
Is this really Gavin's pitch for president? Because, I mean, the guy's basically saying, hey, elect me and I'll ignore the federal laws that I'm supposed to uphold that I don't like, just like I did in California. That's not leadership, by the way. That's ideologically driven selective governance dressed up as compassion. What we're seeing here is a governor openly bragging about undermining immigration enforcement by the federal government, then trying to frame it as a moral stand rather than what it is, a refusal to uphold the rule of law, the law of the land. He paints deportations as cruelty, yet ignores the structural reality that no nation on earth, least of all one recovering from internal economic and cultural rot, can sustain a borderless system built on emotion and anecdote. When Newsom talks about immigrants rebuilding wildfire zones or staffing farms, what he's really arguing is that economic dependence should override national sovereignty. That's not humanitarianism. It's corporate liberal bargain where illegal labor props up broken state budgets and donors, while the cultural costs get dumped on working class communities. And the idea that Stephen Miller is some Bond villain running a private army, that's not critique, it's just straight up delusion. This kind of rhetoric doesn't challenge power, it distracts from the power Gavin's own party wields through media, academia, and permanent bureaucracy in states like California, all of which have insulated this state from accountability for literally years. The real story here isn't ICE raids. It's how Democrats like Gavin manipulate identity politics and manufacture panic to shield their own policy failures. And by the way, deporting millions of illegal immigrants wouldn't collapse the economy. It would actually open it up. It would create millions of jobs and force companies to actually engage with the American workforce again. Over the past 5 years, millions of able-bodied Americans, roughly 6 million according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, have dropped out of the labor force entirely. No longer even looking for work. Why? Because the market was flooded with under-the-table labor, wages were depressed, and legitimate employment was replaced with backdoor deals and off-the-books shortcuts. Gavin defends this system as if it's compassionate, but in reality, it's a rigged labor market that punishes legal workers and rewards corporate exploitation. California's internal economy runs on a black market of cheap, disposable labor, and Gavin's bloated regulatory state all but guarantees it stays that way. Try running a small business in California, in Los Angeles. Between the endless inspections, permits, taxes, and local graft, it's a miracle anyone in this city is still standing, and it's why most of the businesses where I have my business have closed in the last 2 years. That's why companies cut corners, pay cash, and look the other way when it comes to hiring illegal work. You cut the bureaucracy and enforce immigration law, and all of a sudden, the system starts working again. The state grows, the labor market stabilizes, wages rise, and people re-enter the workforce. It's not that complicated, but Democrats don't want solutions. They want a permanent crisis they can manage, manipulate, and milk so they can expand their government power. This isn't about helping immigrants. They don't care about immigrants. Immigrants are just a tool for them. It's about maintaining a state of perpetual crisis so they can build a foundation for their Bolshevik revolution. So here's a challenge to Gavin and California Democrats. If you actually want to fix this problem, hear me out. The system we have now rewards rule breaking, punishes compliance, and creates a two-tiered economy. One legal, overregulated, and shrinking. The other illegal, unchecked, and thriving. Now, while mass deportation might offer short-term wage relief and moral satisfaction, realistically, the economic shock could be real and uneven. The real solution is multi-pronged. First, cut California's suffocating bureaucracy so that small businesses can operate legally without navigating a maze of permits, fees, and inspections designed to extract resources, not enable growth. Second, expand the legal work-based immigration pathways so employers who genuinely need labor can hire transparently, pay fair wages, and stay compliant. Third, enforce existing immigration laws across the board without political gamesmanship or selective outrage. And finally, rebuild the domestic labor force by addressing the root causes of workforce dropout through vocational training, addiction recovery, tax reform, and social incentives that make work not just possible, but worthwhile for everybody in this state and country. You fix these 4 areas and you don't need a crisis to justify the system because you have a system that actually works.
There's a bill by Jack Johnson and Speaker Sexton to punish elected officials who name ICE agents. Marsha Blackburn has a bill at the federal level, 5 years in prison if you name an ICE agent. On the flip side, Justin Jones has a bill to ban masks and require identification. Is that something you guys could do?
Well, we've got a bill pending the legislature. It was introduced months ago on masking.
The masks part is just outrageous.
It's insane. Now, look, I'm sensitive as a former mayor, as an executive, this notion of safety. In certain circumstances, when you have a warrant, you present an ID, there's issues around safety of officers and where it may be appropriate. But now it's universal masking. Poor National Guard were out there in MacArthur Park. They were heroes a few weeks ago, 2,500 to be exact, that were part of the wildfire recovery. They were being celebrated. People were doing selfies because they were so grateful. These same men and women masked up. They're being humiliated and used as pawns for theater. So we have a bill. We're looking at the constitutionality of it, and it appears that we don't have the legal authority for federal agents, but we do for other law enforcement authorities.
No shit!
There's some amendments being made in the bill, and our legal team's looking at it.
I think the alarmists have yet to be wrong. What's the message in terms of just where we stand as a democracy in this moment?
Well, I saw what Governor Abbott did today, announcing a special session that will include redistricting.
Seizing power even after
These guys they're not fucking around, man. They're playing by a totally different set of rules. And here I am in California trying to raise the bar of sort of bipartisanship.
What?
Years and years ago, we did independent redistricting in a state that I assure you, with 2/3 majorities in the legislature, could gerrymander like no other state. And we've been playing fair.
You did.
But I saw what
How?
you just did today. Made me question that entire program. I mean,
The gaslighting is unbelievable. Democrats have gerrymandered California into a one-party Venezuelan-style authoritarian stronghold for the last 5 decades. Then they have the nerve to pretend they're champions of fairness. Not only did they redraw the state into a political fortress, but they've effectively gerrymandered the population itself, inviting in millions of illegal immigrants and stripping away basic voter ID requirements so that verifying someone's identity at the polls is practically taboo now. And I'm not even exaggerating, folks. You can literally walk into a polling station in California, say your name, be led to a digital voting machine, vote, and leave without saying a single word. No ID, no accountability, no questions asked. That's not oversight. It's engineered chaos. But the highlight of Gavin's mental diarrhea was his attempt to lecture us about authoritarianism while admitting that he and the state legislature was scrambling to file a lawsuit against federal agents just to try to demask them, only to realize they don't even have the legal authority to regulate what federal agents wear. The man wants to defy federal law, control ICE operations, and police optics, all while pretending he's powerless the moment the Constitution doesn't bend to his will. This isn't governance, by the way, if you haven't noticed. It's straight up political theater, a performance designed to distract from the fact that his entire model depends on eroding standards, undermining sovereignty, and sustaining just enough chaos to justify his next power grab.
if we don't take back the House of Representatives, I don't want to be alarmist. I don't want to say game over. That will be one of the most profound moments, I think, in modern history of this country. Greek democracy and the Roman Republic, this notion of co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, the rule of law versus the rule of Don. If we're not able to hold that line by taking back Congress, I think that is the red line. It's already, that red line has been crossed for our diverse communities, particularly immigrants, even legal immigrants like Elon Musk that they're threatening. They're serious about that. These guys have no shame and no limits unless we, the people, step up. And next year is a date with destiny, man.
Governor, thank you for doing this. Do you think there's an Epstein list?
I mean, now I'm going to start sounding conspiratorial. After Elon tweeted that out and all of a sudden now it disappears. Really, Trump? Show us. What do you got? Where's the transparency? What carnies? What flim-flammers? What music men? What bullshit artists?
I can't even with this guy anymore. Gavin is out here warning that if Democrats don't take back the House, it's the end of the Roman Republic, because apparently enforcing immigration law and losing an election equals Caesar crossing the Rubicon. The hysterics would be funny if they weren't so revealing. What we're watching is a collapse of a political class that no longer believes in persuasion or shared governance. They believe in control. That's really all that Democrats really care about. Newsom speaks like a man who sees any sort of opposition as illegitimate, who conflates disagreement with oppression, and who weaponizes identity politics, in this case, immigration, Latinos, as a shield for his policy failures. And the irony, he name drops rule of law while defending sanctuary policies that openly defy it. Folks, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, those aren't a thing. They violate federal law. They just haven't been challenged all the way up to the Supreme Court, but they likely will very soon. And at that point, it's probably going to end. Now, the deeper problem here isn't just Gavin. It's the institutional mindset that has taken over the left, a belief that democracy only works when Democrats win, and that losing power is proof the system itself is broken, thus they must reconstruct it from within. Now, that's not democratic conviction, by the way. That's ideological entitlement dressed up as panic. And I think it's also a good time to remind everybody that we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. Anyway, all that being said, let's check out what was happening here in California while Newsom is out on vacation in the East Coast.
Take a look at this video right here. It appears a protester fired some kind of gun at federal agents. This happened this afternoon. It was a really chaotic scene at the time. A lot of smoke was being launched at the protesters. And again, it appears a protester fired back with that weapon.
If that's the kind of America that you would like to live in, well, you're likely a Gavin Newsom voter and also not very bright. So ask yourself, how much of what we're told is real and how much is performance for a public too distracted, too demoralized, or too afraid to question it? When political leaders cloak dysfunction in moral language and rebrand power grabs as compassion, what happens to truth? What happens to sovereignty, to citizenship, to the rule of law? We're living in an era where narratives matter more than outcomes, where identity replaces accountability, and where the people in charge seem more interested in managing your perception than fixing your reality. If the system depends on confusion, crisis, and coercion to sustain itself, maybe the problem isn't who's in charge, it's the machine they've built. And maybe it's time we stop playing along. I don't know. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.